Hi, I'll be showing you how to make a silver rose, not real silver, with polymer clay. I will be using Fimo Soft white polymer clay. You could also use black, and you could also use their silver version too. I'm also going to use this platinum metal powder by Mona Lisa, and I will include a link in the description of where you can purchase this. I actually got mine, if I remember correctly, at an art store. In some other ones, like the silver or the bronze color, I found online. Your polymer clay tools will be helpful as a acrylic roller. If you don't have this, you could use a glass bottle or something else with that will allow you to flatten it. A brush for to apply the powder at the end, and if you have an X-Acto knife, I don't have mine with me, so I'll just be using a regular box cutter, but a regular knife will do too, as long as you don't use it for food later. So what I have here is the white clay. Right now it looks a bit gray because I was doing something else earlier and I got metal powder on it already, but it doesn't matter since it's gonna be covered with metal powder later anyway. So I'm pretty much just rolling this into a log, and it's fairly thin because what I'm making are earrings, so the petals are not gonna be very big. That first one is actually too thin. The second ones are a bit thicker. You don't want to go too thin because otherwise your rose will be very fragile even after baking it. Now if you're using a brand of polymer clay like Kato, then that one could actually go thin and it doesn't break. They have a lot of polymer in it. And so I'm gonna need about 5 to 6 or 7 petals per rose. And to do the center one, you wanna use it in the horizontal way instead of on the long way, and you're gonna roll it into itself. I actually later changed my mind about this petal. I found it too thick on the top, so I chose a different one. And it's just a matter of thinning the edges and then start rolling it into itself. You have to have a really light touch when you're making roses because the petals are thin. And now I'm just sort of folding the tops into the back to simulate a real rose. Then I'm using the second petal, and I'm also thinning the edges. Now that one I put it on the vertical way, and just where the first one ended, I made a slight overlap with that petal to put it. And this is pretty much what you want to do when you're making roses. You want to overlap slightly, maybe by a third or a quarter, with the new petal you're going to use. So in that case, you can see how I'm pointing to where it ends, and then I'm covering some of it slightly with the new petal so that it looks natural. Now once you have these two petals, the third one is going to be right in the middle of where those two petals meet, and I'm using all of those into a vertical shape of the petals. And you want to press at the bottom lightly. You're going to have that end where you're holding the rose from, the little cone shape at the bottom. Now the new petals, start using them more on the horizontal way, so they're longer. because as you progress with the rows, the petals get bigger. They're not as folded into itself. So you start using them on the long edge instead of the short edge. I believe that's gonna be my last petal that I put. And I'm pressing on the back to make sure they stick. And it's about the same size as my other rows. So the next step that will follow will be adding a piece of clay. It's a very tiny piece where I'm going to be hanging the earring from. So I'm gonna make a hole in the clay. So I'm using this piece of clay as a reinforcement so that it doesn't tear once I make the hole. And I'm pressing it lightly. I've chose that as the petal where it's gonna hang from. So now the next step should be adding the metal powder. To do that, I'm going to use a brush. I recommend that you have a dusting mask, or if you don't, keep your head, your face away from this as much as you can, because there will be small particles that come up into the air when you use a brush, and this is something you don't want to breathe. It is metal powder, literally. It's not something you want to have in your lungs. It won't come out. It'll get stuck there. So just protect yourself while you're doing this. And you want to make sure you cover the inside of the petals and the outside. As this is why I was using this thin brush. You could also use a round brush for this. And if you happen to fold or messed up the rose somehow with a brush, at this stage you can easily make it go back and mold it back to where it's supposed to be. The first time I was doing this with the first rose, I messed up my center, but I was able to fix it with the tools since it hasn't been baked yet. After you're done with the inside, you want to cover the outside as well, and you're gonna let it rest for a little bit so it hardens, because the clay has been handled, it's warm. If you let it sit for about 5 minutes, it will come to room temperature, so that when we cut it on the end, it will not be so malleable. Alright, now I'm gonna cut the roses. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to make the hole from which it's going to hang. So this is where I put the extra piece of clay, and this is the petal. I'm going to start on this side so that this side has the smoother edge. Then I turn it around and I'm going to redo it here. So this is where it's going to hang from. I'll do the same with the other rose. And then I'm going from the back. And now, if you have a clay cutter, use that. I'm going to cut this stem. And I'm not gonna cut it all the way from one side, but that way I don't apply pressure in one side and then it becomes deformed. I'm going to add more metal powder on that end. Then I'll do the same here. And this clay hasn't been baked yet, so you have to have a very light touch. If you have long nails, be careful too, because you could be marking your rose with your nails. Alright, so these are the two roses, and now I'm gonna put them in the oven. Alright, now I'm gonna brush again the cut end of the roses before baking them. Now this metal powder, it anneals in the oven. Usually it anneals at 300. However, the clay shouldn't go above 260. So I'm just gonna put it at 260 for a longer time. Alright, this is what the earring looks like when it's finished, and I'm just gonna briefly show you how I inserted the jump ring. The rose is now baked, and I will be using these jump rings. I was using aluminum ones because they're easier to open, but you could use stainless steel or base metal jump rings. And I'm also using this flat nose, middle nose plier to open the jump rings. And if you have two, that's actually better, because then with one you can hold on to the jump ring, and with the other one you can bend it open or bend it closed. After I tried to put the jump ring the first time, I realized that the hole that I had made before baking was too small, so I was having too much trouble putting it on. And what I used was a handheld drill, a manual drill, to enlarge the hole, as you will be seeing next. This is it. When you use this, you wanna enlarge it from both sides so that the ends of the hole remain smooth. And so after I did that, I put on two jump rings to make the rose hang the proper way, as you will see on this picture. And this is a picture of the earrings. Now next is what happens when you use weak polymer clay or it is too thin. This is another pair that I had made extra that I purposely broke, because I always like to test my pieces to make sure that they will not break, and this one didn't pass that test.